So I want to show you how Cocoapods can be used to manage dependencies for a iOS project. And to do this, I'm assuming here that Cocoapods is already installed. So if you don't have Cocoapods, just Google for Cocoapods and you'll end up on the website. And you can follow these instructions down here to install. And I would recommend that you use RVM instead of the Ruby that ships with your Mac. So to install RVM, you can just search for RVM and follow the installation instructions here to install RVM. Then go over to Cocoapods, install Cocoapods. And so I've got that all running now. And what we're going to do is create a brand new Xcode project, and I'll create a single view application, and I'll call this my Google Maps demo, because what I'm going to do is pull in the Google Maps SDK as a Cocopod. And I'm going to write this in Swift, and we'll go put this along into our source code tree that we've been maintaining this semester. So this is lecture 9. And we'll stick that right there. And so here's my brand new skeleton app, and I'm going to use Google Maps SDK with this. And so to accomplish this, I'm going to simply exit out of my Xcode for now, and I'm going to go down to the command line, and I'm going to create a file. Sorry. I'm going to go down to the project directory. Alright, so here I am in the project, and I'm going to create a file here. I'll just use VI, called my pod file. So it's right in the top level directory of my project. And what I'm going to do in this pod file is I'm going to specify in a textual format the dependencies that my project needs in order to build. And there's different ways to find it, but one easy thing to do is just search for the Google Maps SDK iOS. And once we land on that page, there's some guides, and there should be a Get Started guide. And when I go down here, it tells you, hey, you can use Cocoapods for this. So install Cocoapods, and this will make your life easy. So I'm going to create a pod file, and right out of their tutorial, this is the spec that I want, the pod spec. Okay. S is missing. Okay, and I'm going to do 3, version 8.3. So the only line here that really deals with Google Maps is this pod. So as I add more dependencies, every dependency that I add to my project is simply going to be pod space, and then the name of the pod, and then optionally a version. If I leave the version off, every time I do a pod install, it's just going to go and grab the latest copy of Google Maps. So I can fix it to a version, or I can keep it the same. This is what I'm going to do. And then I've got Cocoapods already installed on my computer, so I'm going to run pod install to actually get this thing to set up the dependencies and download them. Okay, so it's done. It's now fetched the latest, greatest version of Google Maps, 1.10.0, and which I believe came out just this month. And it tells me an interesting message on the very bottom there, and I want you to note that. It says, from now on, use Google Maps demo XC workspace. So we're no longer going to use the Xcode Project file that was created when we created it. But if we go over to Finder and look at this project we just created, okay, if you take a look there, this was what we normally used to open the project with. But once I've done a pod install, it creates a XC workspace file. And this is what we're going to use from now on to open the project and build. And when I do that, okay, you'll notice in addition to my target, this project, it also has this thing called pods. And down in here, you can see all the pods associated with my project. Okay. Now there's a little bit more I need to do here to start using the SDK, but this is all I need to do to get the dependencies in my project. Okay? There's some other things I need to do. I need to get an app token, and in our next demo later this evening we'll be talking about that. But anytime I want to use a dependency that's a pod, all I got to do is add it to that pod file and do a pod install the first time or an update.